Welcome back to the goddamn room. With us today, very special guest. This was one that I wasn't expecting, but when it fell on my lap, I had to take the opportunity. It's a huge opportunity for me, something that I definitely wanted to share with the world. So happy that he was able to give us some time. Ladies and gentlemen, with us in the goddamn room is Ricardo Aguirre Jr., the lead man at Digital Bodega Productions, and a bad dude. Rick, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing all right, but I get just to correct the record. I'm not the lead guy. That's Ishmael Vasquez, your countryman.
Wow.
He runs Digital Bodega, and he basically is Digital Bodega right now. So no, you can. I don't run things. I don't run anything. I just come up with ideas, and he helps facilitate them.
Okay, I stand corrected. But this is the band that we do see when we watch Digital Bodega's productions.
Yo, shout out to you, Izzy, bro.
We do got to give Izzy his flowers. I don't want any problems, Iz.
Yeah.
Please, don't come for me. We're too small. All right, real quick, Rick. Can you give us a quick intro into who you are and how is it that you work with Digital Bodega? I know you just mentioned Ishmael Vasquez, but what was that process like in the beginning? You guys come up with Digital Bodega. Who talks to who? What does that conversation look like?
So Digital Bodega actually started out as a nonprofit as an offshoot from a film school based in the South Bronx called the Ghetto Film School. And it was started by Joe Hall. It's been going for 25 years. This is the 25th year of its existence. It's expanded to LA. And if I'm not mistaken, they have an office in London, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that. But the whole idea of the Ghetto Film School was to give teenagers an opportunity to learn, the ins and out of the movie industry, teach them skills that they need to find jobs in the industry. But what ultimately ends up happening, especially like in the South Bronx, you have minority kids, Black, Latino, and the industry is very unforgiving, and it's a who you know kind of thing. So one of the things was that you skill up these kids, and every year they would have a thesis project where they would go somewhere in the world and film it. So they've been to Germany, Mexico City, Paris, all over the place. And so when they finish the program, then they're ready for college. It's it's not like it's a path to the Tisch School at NYU or the film the film program at Columbia University or UCLA or USC. So the thing was, Digital Bodega was started to bring on projects to help these kids also skill up on in a real world setting. So you're taking on clients, they give you an idea what they want to do, and you formulate the idea, you go and you shoot it, and then you edit it, right? So at that time, it was a nonprofit. Ghetto Film School is also a nonprofit. But Joe figured, well, since the industry is the way that it is, right, and you've got these kids kind of sort of waiting to get into the industry, it's not a charity. So he ultimately turned Digital Bodega into a for-profit mechanism. So the kids can make money, right? And then by that time, you're not talking about kids, you're talking about young adults, like in their early 20s. And so what ultimately ended up happening is that you had a client list that goes from, Fox, Universal Studios, Celino and Barnes, anybody that knows those jingles. It goes from local businesses to, international businesses too. So, and then ultimately the goal was always to try to get to a point where Digital Bodega is doing its own work, the original work. And at this point, there's been several short films. There's been independent projects that have been produced. And now we're going full-fledged into our own projects, right? So, and Thrilla was one of them. And it was just like okay, we're gonna follow these guys through this tournament. No. It was just the right opportunity to go ahead and follow Mike Davila and Adam through this process. So, and before we started recording, there's more on the docket. We're going, I'm a contributor to Digital Bodega, but, we're going from client work to independent original work.
So to recap, similar to what Netflix does when they go Netflix original series, you guys are trying to push yourself into this domain where, yeah, we do work for other people, but when we do our own projects, this isn't original. This is our stuff coming out of our home.
Direct. Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. I wanted to get that. And then secondly, a lot of people may not know what Thrilla is. I've announced it many times, but Thrilla is the documentary on Mike Thrilla Davila, BJJ player, a BJJ legend, soon to be, in my opinion, and owner of Legends Martial Arts, co-owner with Adam Colorado, which you just spoke about. What made you say yes to this project, though? Because following a guy who hasn't competed in a while, he's just opening a school. Now he's going to be, he's a black belt, which adds a lot of pressure. Then COVID happened, and then you were still with the project during COVID. So what's that like?
So I've known Mike since high school. We've played high school football together. We're like our favorite movie's Bad Boys, right? Sometimes he's Mike Lowry and I'm Marcus Burnett, and then sometimes I'm Mike Lowry. He's more, we're boys like that. We're practically brothers. So when COVID happened and then, they shut down, when he got the invite to compete at JJOT, he asked me, if I could help him out with accumulating footage and, getting him on camera to answer a questionnaire that EBI sent out to to help get that stuff. Because usually, as Mike told me, that pre-COVID, EBI would send a production team or a production guy to where you're at and do all that stuff, right? But since it was COVID, they couldn't do that. So all the competitors had to do it on their own. And so he just wanted me to help him out because of, my film background. And after a couple of days, I figured that, maybe I asked Mike, why don't we just follow you through the whole thing? And then especially if he's got to lose 45 pounds and all that stuff. So I went to Mike and I asked him, I was like, why don't we just follow you? And he's like, man, I actually thought about that. And yeah, that would be fucking great. And so then I went to Izzy, and Izzy, I didn't have to finish the question. I'm like, Izzy, what if we follow Mike? And he, fuck yeah, let's do it. Because you got to remember, at the time, we're also not doing work, right? We're home. And it was essentially just to get out the house. There was no plan for it to be a feature-length documentary. If anything, it was more of like, at the end of this process, at least we'll have enough footage to probably put a short film together, and be able to be like, all right, we did something during this time, and yeah, because the thing too, it's like training. When you are constantly working as a filmmaker and then all of a sudden your stuff stops, that muscle memory kind of like, you got to get reacclimated with your equipment. How do I interview people? All these things that, are usually fresh in your mind. And when you stop doing it for a long period of time, you get rusty. So that was the initial reason why we went to follow Mike, because it was just to get out the house. It wasn't something that we thought of anything else but just as an exercise.
Yeah, I think that was awesome, and then it ended up being quite the film. The story of Thrilla does focus on Coach Mike's journey going back to jiu-jitsu overtime. You did also have some really in-depth conversation with him. I don't want to spoil it for anyone that hasn't seen the film, but there's a moment that we kind of see Mike be very vulnerable and very honest about a lot of his raw emotions that he has to deal with. Also, the weight cut, like you said, 45-pound weight cut is a lot, and then, of course, during COVID, it's really hard to cut that weight. It's not the same as pre-COVID, where you could just do several things. A lot of the technologies that we have now, post-COVID, didn't exist at that time to deal with the weight cut. So what is it like to have to put yourself behind a camera and watch somebody like that get emotional and have those moments?
All right, so I'm not going to spoil it either. I've known Mike, again, we're talking now almost 30 years, right? And he's a very stoic individual. He is very close to the chest guy. And honestly, that day it was actually Father's Day, and he was not, we were supposed to record early in the day, and he took hours and hours and hours to show up. And, by the time he got there, and the thing was, it was like, you don't always sort of anticipate these moments, but there's a series of things that you have to like allow the subject to give you. And one of the things, it's like, when he mentioned when he started jujitsu, what his life was like prior to that, that one kernel of thing. It was like, There was no intention, to get him emotional or anything like that. It's just I need you to guide me through this process. And then, as he's guiding through the process, right, then the moment happened, and, it's just basically sticking in the pocket and allowing things to happen, right? Because the other thing too is I don't think he'd be able to get to that point if he didn't trust me. And then the other thing too is like not being you no regardless of our friendship, you never want to exploit a person's emotions. You want them to be organic. You want it to be, you don't want to pressure anybody into because the other thing too, he could have just said, no, I don't want to, whatever. And then we'd have just moved on. Right. Or it would just been one of Mike's stoic moments. I mean, it really highlights the movie in the sense that, this is not just about jujitsu. It's like why people get to where they are, what are the motivations in people's lives to do what they do. My initial approach to interviewing Mike and Adam was to like, I want to know what you guys know because I don't know anything about jiu-jitsu. I've seen Mike compete. I watched his EBI matches. I watched his matches when he won the when he won world champs back in 2013. But I'm not studying it the way that he does and Adam does. So as a layman, I want to get to a place where you don't overload the audience with this inside kind of jujitsu talk, but it's like, okay, the reason and the meaning and what they feel about what they do is something people could relate to. So, because then from there, the audience can relate into their own lives about their relationships and their passions about what they do. So it was just, and look, I got to give him a lot of credit because he allowed himself to get there too, and, the funny thing is, he's like, he really didn't, over the years that like he never really talked about it to me. So like to me, that's more like, that just solidified our relationship as friends more than anything.
Yeah, having that kind of cathartic moment. When I watched it, watching Mike get emotional got me emotional. I started crying. I was like, oh my God, what the hell's happening to me? And I sent this to my coworkers at the time when I was working at Indeed, and they were like, this is an amazing film. There's some hot guys with no shirts on. It's all females. So they were all like, my teammates are all females. There's 8 women and 1 dude there, and it's just me. And I was like, hey, my coach has a documentary about his latest competition, the cycle of his life. Do you guys want to watch it? They're like, hell yeah, we'll watch it. And I threw it over there, and all these girls in Connecticut were like, wow, there's some naked guys on the screen. I like this.
No, what's really funny is that when it screened it at a film festival, and my dad's in the audience, and he, he's like, yo, it's like I overheard like there was this couple behind us, and he's like, and homegirl's like, why don't you do jujitsu like that? Why don't you go like? He's like causing problems.
You meant to make a documentary from the heart, and now you're a homewrecker. God damn.
That's art, baby.
That's what we could do. But yeah, so the girls were all really impressed, and then when they saw the scene of Mike get emotional, they were like, yo, the dude made me cry. And I was like, I'm sorry. It's just, I didn't think he was going to cry. They're like, what do you mean? I was like, he's my coach. He's one of my 2 coaches. Him and Adam are my coaches. If you see Adam cry, that's normal. It's a normal response. Adam is a very openly emotional person.
Mm-hmm.
Mike is stoic, very to the point, very honest, very upfront with you, doesn't hold any punches. And he's not rude or nasty. He's just just A to B. This is how he communicates. And he makes jokes and everything. He's still funny. But 90% of the time when Mike is talking to you, it's an A to B conversation.
Right. It's to the point. It's very to the point. He
kind of has it's like a telegram. Like he's sending you the message in code, but it's straight. This is exactly what I need. This is exactly what I'm saying. This is exactly what I mean. There's no way to fuck this up.
Trust me. It's like, when he coming to me, he's like, yo, Rick, you fucking up. It's like, okay, I am fucking up. Yep, okay. All right, time to adjust.
Yeah, as a student, I can affirm that that's true. I've had a moment or two where he didn't say it, but like he gives you the look, and you're like, yeah,
yep.
I know. I'm sorry. Yep. Let me fix myself. My bad, coach. I wish he had talked about something in the film. I don't know if he'll bring it up if I ever get to interview him. We've talked about it.
Oh yeah, good luck on that, because he, it's like, look. And I love him, but this is what I love about him. I've known him for like all this time, and it's like pulling teeth to get him on camera. It's pulling. It's like, Mike, trust me. So you better not make me cry like last time. I'm not gonna make you cry. I just need to know what happened.
Yeah, I'm trying to get him to talk about his career before joining Marcelo Garcia. There's a few things there that I wish more people got his side of the story, because I know you know about the situation that happened way back then. And what I'm referring to, why I'm being a little coded, is because I want the people to watch, to do the research and see why Mike Davila is such a person whose name carries so much weight in jiu-jitsu, and what it is that kind of got in that type of issue, in that particular circumstance. I would say, I don't want to say controversy, but it is controversial. When you go back and you look at jiu-jitsu over time, we've never seen that happen with somebody like Mike. And then years later, the actual same set of people are in the same set of issues. One particular individual, who I will not name, is again the culprit of another team splitting and decided to leave again. And you can think, you can thank Mike. Mike was the first one to do it, and then later on, B team did it again. For those of you who got the contacts in jiu-jitsu, yeah, it's a similar situation with Mike Davila. You can go ahead and look it up. That's one of those moments where if you go back in jiu-jitsu, you're like, what the hell just happened? Why did we go through this?
I will tell you this about Mike. Bullshit detector is off the charts. Absolutely off the charts. He's able to sniff things out way before a lot of people do. And, kind of sort of to bring it back to, Thrilla, and this is that he might not speak a lot, but the wheels are turning all the time. The wheels are turning all the time. There's always a plan developing. There's always something that's like he's very, very perceptive and receptive to things. And when I heard about that stuff, and it's just like, okay, I'm not in the I'm not in the community. I'm just I'm an audience member, But when Mike, out of all people in my life, is going through kind of like this situation that he went through, is like, oh no, they fucked up.
Yeah.
Oh, they fucked up.
The math wasn't mathing, because believe it or not, I had gone to that particular place where the issue occurred the week after Mike left, and I didn't know who he was at the time. I had heard from 5 or 6 of the students there. They're like, "Oh yeah, we went through all this stuff." And one of the guys, he grabbed a bunch of the guys that used to be here in the team, and they left. They packed up and left with him. But he did it in the right way. But there were some people who were upset with him, because they're like, "Man, Dan, that particular coach is the best coach in the world." And then there was the other half of the room that, they didn't want to say it out loud because they're still there. But they were like, no, but if I'm going through what he's going through, I have to agree with him. I would probably do the same thing. So as you sat there kind of evaluating things, and you're like, well, that doesn't make sense. And then years later, we watched it play out again, and I said the same thing. The minute it happened, I was like, kind of funny how Mike caught onto that trend real fucking quick. Mike was the first one to leave, and then years later, now we have B team. And we're just staring at each other like, ain't that some shit? When he did it, had a lot to say, but now B team, no questions asked, right?
What's actually really funny is that I don't know, you'd have to ask Mike about this, but the relationship that he has with Adam, right? It's like, when I first met Adam, obviously I'm like, oh, this dude's an animal. I'm not fucking. First of all, I step into Legends or Jiu-Jitsu room or whatever. I'm just like, I'm not fucking with anybody or anything. But when Mike introduced me to Adam, I say that Adam is like a rambunctious puppy. He's got that big Labrador retriever energy, but then he'd also kill you, right? So the thing was, at first I'm like, how did Mike and Adam kind of how did they do this? Because it's this, I know Adam is not Mike's kind of cup of tea, right? Knowing Mike. But then, being able to sit down and spend time with Adam, is like, oh no, I got it now. Because of the authenticity of Adam. And that's what Mike is always looking for, man. Just do you be authentic with yourself. And it doesn't matter, look, you don't have to be, awesome at what you do. Just be awesome at who you are. And that's what Adam gave him, because that's why it's in the film is yo, I'm from the Bronx, so somebody's super happy, yo, what, you're stay away from people like that. But it's authentic and it's honest, and that's what Mike has always been looking for. That's, and in the situations that he found himself in and as you were talking about, it's, the cream rises to the top, right?
Yeah.
And at some point, he had to make his own decisions and kind of get raked through the coals at the time, but look at him now.
Right. And that's what I was thinking too. Something else I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned you're shooting during COVID. You kind of have to shake the cobwebs off a little in the beginning. What challenges down the line, like, were you not expecting to have, and it just kind of showed up, and you were like, shit, okay, all right, kind of on the spot, like, oh, what the fuck? That's a problem? Like, why do something that you would have never seen pre-COVID or after COVID that you saw when you were shooting during COVID that had you like, shit, what the fuck is this?
Well, COVID itself, right? Because where they're telling you, at the time, and remember, we're not getting a lot of like clear information about what the virus is doing or how it, spreads. So it's like 6 feet apart, wear a mask and all this other shit. So, we walk into this room, right, at Legends, and there is like 2 windows. And then there's like 12 people there. And then 12 people turn into 16, and 16 turn into 20. And it's like, well, I hope we don't get COVID, right? But again, the thing that we just wanted to do was just shoot, and you're shooting for 7 weeks, and obviously the action is very, very repetitive. And so it's like, all right, so what is this thing going to actually look like? Because obviously we have a tournament, actually the thing was, it was also like whether or not that Mike was going to pull the plug on it, because we're getting close. As we were getting close to the competition, the governor of New York put a travel it wasn't a travel ban. Like, it could not go to Texas. It was, when you come back, you got to quarantine and we're going to monitor you, that kind of shit, right? And then it's like, how does that look? I don't know. But the level of concern that we had getting close, that whether or not that he's going to make weight, two, what are the travel, I booked the tickets probably like that Wednesday. Well, I don't want to say that one, but probably like the week before, because, when Adam starts to get nervous, then everybody should start getting nervous, because he's, let's go, let's do this, whatever. But it was more about COVID, as opposed to, we were always going to have restrictions on what we could do filming wise, especially when we got to El Paso, because when we got to El Paso, they were only going to allow one person next to the mat while we shot, because of all the restrictions that were put on the competition itself, right? Because you had one of the things, weigh-in happened the morning of the competition, when usually, weigh-in happens the night before, right? So there's a lot of like, uncertainty. Everything was very, very uncertain all the way through the competition, or at least towards the end of Mike's second match. But that was mostly it, because there wasn't really anything that we were so concerned about filming. The only thing that I totally fucked up was, I forgot to tell Mike, step on the scale and just like film yourself on the scale for each week. So then, we could put that in, or at least I have context to which, okay, week 1, you're this weight. Week 2, you're this weight. Week 3, week 4. So like, the thing was, it's luckily Mike wrote, his weight down in a book every week. So then it was just like, okay, fine. That saved me. But like, having that visual, was something that was like, that I blew. But what I ultimately ended up doing was, you see his physiology change from week 1 to week 7, right? Where it's just like, you see him the first week, he's all chunky, kind of. I mean, like, he was 180, but like, he's still buff, right? And then right before, when he steps on the scale in El Paso, he's rail thin. And the other thing too is, not production wise, it was just like his health. It was getting to the point where, we picked him up from the hospital. I was, see, like, that's a Freudian slip. Picked him up from the airport. Like, he is in bad shape. He is in bad shape. And I got concerned. It wasn't a film anymore. It was like, my friend's hurting. But I know he's a strong dude mentally. So it's like, look, if he shows any signs that like he's quitting, then I'm done, right? So I'm taking him to the fucking hospital. Because the last thing I need is like his girlfriend, his fiance now, and his mom coming like, "Wow, you let that shit happen? What's wrong with you?" It's like, yeah, I'm not going down that route. I'm not going down that route. So those were the concerns, really. Izzy and I are very confident in what we do, and it just like the uncertainty of COVID and what that brought, and then what if we get sick? How is this gonna play out? And ultimately it turned out to be like a crazy turn, because at that turn I'm like, okay, now I think we got to film now. I think we got to film. But yeah, no, it was production wise, it wasn't much of an issue. It was just more of, our terms are being dictated by the protocols of COVID.
Yeah, I remember we first started shooting. You were shooting the initial Jiu-Jitsu OT commercial with Mike. Mike kept flubbing it. It was hilarious.
I had to put that in there.
He fucked up so many times, and he got mad at himself because he's like, "I had it," and I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh my god!" And then we start training, and I think like the following week we did another session. You were there again, and then you were recording the sessions. Steve Ramos had come over.
Yeah.
Ramos is a demon. I don't know.
Mhm.
That guy's like real life Tarzan. Like,
Bro,
he took his shirt off, and I was like, "Oh no!" I put my shirt right back on. I was like, "Nope."
one of the things that I was doing is, so I'm gonna look through the people who have competed, and then whatever, and then that's Steve Ramos, and his highlight reel is out of control. It's absolutely out of control. This dude's an animal, bro. He's an animal.
He's a true savage, man. But the craziest thing is, like, when I met Ramos, I knew who he was by competition, but I never met him in person. And then I'm like, oh, I've heard of Steve Ramos. I know who this guy is. He's under JT Torres. I went to shake his hand, and I'm like, oh, I know this grip. I've had this grip before. I know exactly what I'm shaking hands with. And then you see him in real life, and like, not the fucking TV, because on the TV he looks like a cut up dude. He took his fucking shirt off. We all went like this. We were like, no, I'm not. Fuck that. I'm not doing that shit. I don't know this guy. That was the first time I went home, looked at my wife, and was like, I'm so sorry. I need to work harder.
Come on, dog.
I need to work harder. And she was like, why? You're perfect the way you are. And I was like, no.
Yo,
I just
that. No, take that. No. Don't do that to yourself. Take that advice. It's fine. You know what? Because she ain't looking for nobody else. How about that?
That's true. I am grateful. But I was fucking around, and my wife was like, what'd you do? And I was like, I trained with this guy today. This son of a bitch took his shirt off. I was like, so we have Tarzan in the gym. I bet. Thanks, coach. That's what I needed to see fucking Tarzan in real life. He's so strong. And then the son bitch's brolic is cut up, lean. And then I was like, what's your diet look like? He's like, oh, dude, I'm vegan. I was like, oh, get the fuck out.
Yeah.
I threw the book over. I was like, you know what? I'm done. I quit. I'm not doing this no more. I mean, I was joking, but it was hilarious when you go into that moment. You meet a guy like Ramos, and you're like, oh, hell no.
But the thing too is that like how helpful he was, and how like informative that he was, and I think that's one of the cool things about the project, or at least that process, right? Those 7 weeks, that how everybody came together, like everybody had the goal, everybody was there for. But and then the thing too is like you saw it in the training, like even outside of Mike, right? Everybody, like as the week started going, like moving forward, towards the end, there was a lot more people in, and everybody was going hard, which was really, really dope to see.
Yeah, I when I was on the mats, I remember significantly, not just the intensity getting better in the room, but all of us were really, really strong on the OT. Like the OT rules, if you made me play OT right now, I'd probably win the rounds. No problem. Because we were training that hard, and then we were taking notes from like what worked and what didn't work. And Ramos was giving him pointers, and you saw Jose, the big Puerto Rican brother in the documentary. Biggie grabs you. Like, that's not a guy that you're gonna get out from. And Mike was escaping, and we were like,
and I think that was because I didn't come in like knowing like background about jiu-jitsu so much, but just being able to see that, okay, everybody's here for Mike, but then it's like when everybody, gets a session with Mike, everybody's kind of like sort of trying to skill up to get back to Mike. You know what I'm saying? And that sort of effort, and it's like big dudes, little dudes, skinny dudes, and everybody's just going at it. And it was like, and again, I former athlete, play college football. That thing, when everybody is in it is it's the best part of what you do and what you're preparing for. And yeah, man, honestly, man, it was a treat, because you get motivated after that, right? You see people, hey man, throwing caution to the wind with everything that was going on at the time, but like showing up and just giving it their all. It was really awesome to see.
Yeah, those training rooms, when you go into a training room and you see that kind of energy, it is something different. Like you said, it was weird. It was like iron sharpening iron, and we were all getting better. But then Mike would take it to another level, and then would be like, "Oh crap, we gotta make it a little more competitive for coach. Otherwise, the guys he's gonna go up against, it's just gonna be too easy." So we're all trying to scale back up. There are a few guys on the team that I could say, had some really great roles with him, where they made it super competitive. I think around the time he got injured, that was when we were like, we were told like, watch Mike's neck, protect Mike's neck at all costs. And I was like, okay, we cool, we got this. And that's the thing. He's not in a room full of guys that are trying to like puff up their chest and be the big bad dog on campus. We don't do that in our gym. Luckily, Legends isn't that kind of team. What you did see was a lot of us make sure that no matter what we did, we protect the coach. We watched coach do his thing. And as a student, it's fucking awesome because there was times where I know I was not a challenge to him because I was like, what the fuck am I going to challenge a black belt? Let's be real here. This is a world-class black belt. If he was a regular black belt, I'd be like, yeah, I can do this. I can take this. He's world-class. This is a guy that's like levels ahead of people. You know what I'm saying? The guys he's competed against, I can name all of them, and all of them have been in the top 5 at some point in their lives. So what the fuck? What was I going to do? Nothing. I was just there for support at that point. I rolled with Mike, and then eventually at some point, I think Mike was like, you know what? Let me teach him while he does this. Make it harder for me by adding this. Make it more difficult for me by not letting me escape this way. This is how I'm typically going to escape.
I was just about to say that. That like, it's a learning lesson. Anytime, as I was seeing it, that like, it's like, first of all, he's like thankful that you're there, and, he's gonna show you something that, how to get one over on you. And then, all right, so this is how I did it. And then try to see if you can do it. And that's just a sign of a great teacher. It's not what's funny is that it wasn't about him. Obviously it was about him, those 7 weeks, but he really didn't make it about him, which is dope.
Yeah, that's just who Mike is, though. I've noticed that over the years now. Believe it or not, my biggest issue when I met Mike reminds me of my brother, my eldest brother. My eldest brother passed away in 2009, 2010. So the way he talks, even the stature, his size, his everything about Mike, I was like, I first saw him, and like there was a few weeks where like I just didn't talk to Mike at all. I just tried to stay away from him because I was like, it's just creepy to like look at a guy and think of my brother so quickly. A natural leadership, the way that he speaks to people, the kindness he shows you, the way that he respects every person in the room. I'll be honest, I'm probably the worst student ever. But I am, and I can be honest about it. I am the most inconsistent, terrible student in that department. But I never saw Mike treat me differently. I never saw him like, and that's something that Wade Rome, 4th degree black belt under Ricardo Aguirre, he said the same thing. He said, "You want to know if a coach is really good? Watch how he treats his worst student. Watch how he interacts with his worst student. And if he's still smiling and he still taps him on the back and he still lets him breathe a little bit, that's the kind of coach you want." And I was like, yeah. When Mike started doing that for me, I was like, okay, this is the kind of coach I want. But the initial first few weeks were hard because I'm like, how am I going to go up against a guy that reminds me of somebody who's gone, who I loved more than anything in the world, who was my idol while he was alive? And then to deal with that with Mike. And then I got to meet Mike. I was like, nah, Mike's his own person. I don't have to. That part of my brain shut off quickly. And then I was like, it's just Mike. And Coach Mike is awesome. But like you said, he's in a room full of people who support him for a reason. He's a phenomenal coach. He's really good at talking you through the tough moments in competition. And he has, like you said, he's always got a plan. There's always something going on in his head where he's like, okay, well, that doesn't work in this. And that doesn't work in this. And that doesn't work in this.
Yeah.
And he finds it. He finds it. No matter which way we can look at it, I don't know how he does it, but he scales everything in his brain and goes, okay, so this is the worst case scenario for me. I'll work on it.
And it kind of, it kind of goes to the point of, the idea of, you want to live a savage life, you got to pay a savage price, which is awesome line, right? But, he studies, right? Like he consumes jujitsu, he reads, that's one of the things about, like, I've always known about Mike, that he's very, once he gets his passion, that's it. It's not like he's just only jujitsu, right? It's just, his, like, the kind of person that he is needs something to sink his teeth in, and he's going to give it the respect that it deserves. And so there's always another way to look at a thing for him. And it's that, that's why I'm so happy for him that, like, he found he found his calling. And and if it wasn't jujitsu, right? Like, it was coaching in some way, shape, or form. He's always wanted to bestow something upon people that, or like kids, actually, like kids that are kind of sort of aimless or whatever, that, like, we all have we all have these times in life where, growing up, that we feel like we're lost. And, he's very cognizant of that. And it's focus on a thing, be able to just work through the thing. And then who knows what happens in the next 10 years. But through that, you're going to gain discipline if you are up for it, right? Being able to learn through the difficulties and everything like that. So, and I also wanted to say, like, just to get back to, like, the thing that you were saying about your brother is that, you can never really replace the people that you lose, right? And even when you want the person that comes up in your life, somebody in your life that comes up that you feel like, okay, that person could fill the spot, it's never the case that way. It's more of you as a person kind of overcome that loss and then allowed to be taught again, So, and I'm obviously, I'm very happy that you're able to do that. But, yeah, man, I mean, I'm pretty sure you found a great teacher for that.
Oh yeah, I found a phenomenal teacher for that. All right, coming back from it. So you're a filmmaker that could have gone down so many different paths. I know we talked about Mike and that decision with Thrilla. Thrilla's awesome. But what made you pursue documentary filmmaking instead of any of the other composites or different genres?
That's really funny because I got my master's in documentary filmmaking in 2014. Initially, I wanted to go to film school. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go to film school. I was sure that I wanted to get a master's. It was either creative writing or film school, because prior to that time, I was working at the Ghetto Film School, helping out, like, doing some administrative work, admin, inventory stuff. After I got my bachelor's from Mercyhurst, shout out to Mercyhurst, didn't know what I wanted to do. It's kind of sort of like goes up parallels kind of Mike's journey into jiu-jitsu, that I didn't really know what I wanted to study in grad school, but I knew it was going to something creative, because it was just, all right, I'm like, I suck at math, I'm really slow on deadlines, so I might as well do something creative. So then I went to CCNY, and I didn't know. I went to orientation. They have this one building that looks like a 1970s space prison, and another building that is like a Gothic kind of cathedral looking building, right? And they're like, okay, everybody that wants to do creative writing stays in this building, and anybody that wants to, inquire about filmmaking goes to Shepherd Hall, right? Which looks like a fucking cathedral. So I'm like, no, fuck this. I'm going there. I'm going that way. And then go in, talk to some advisors. And then, I just pulled the trigger. It's like, all right, cool, fine. Initially, I wanted to get in as a screenwriter, like wanted to just like focus on my writing. When it was time to submit your applications and everything, they were going to waitlist me for the narrative track. Now, narrative is your fiction, your movies, right? Drama, science fiction, whatever. And then they had a documentary track. So I was going to have to wait a year to get into the narrative track. But then they told me, but we have a couple of spaces open in the documentary track, and I didn't want to wait. So I was like, fuck it, I'll take documentary. If I'd have waited 2 weeks, I would have gotten a documentary because somebody dropped out. Anyways, so documentary is like the complete opposite of narrative filmmaking, right? Because in narrative filmmaking, because I was looking for structure, I want to learn how to write a script, right? I want to learn the production process, right? So a lot of the work is more in pre-production, right? The script, the budget, all these things that you need to go in, shoot, and get out, right? Come to find out that like people try to milk that shit for all it's worth. But in the documentary process, it's you got to follow your story. So there's obviously you have to write, right? But the thing is like you have to follow wherever the story's taking you. So you can't predict where it's going to go. And there's a lot of people that feel like, I can steer the story into a place where I'm comfortable with, right? So it's kind of like the scientific process, right? You come up with a theory, and you go through how do you do the scientific method, right? Everybody look it up. But that's how you have to approach documentaries, right? Because you may have this idea of what the outcome may be, but in the middle of you gaining your evidence, things start taking different turns. So I was kind of sort of apoplectic about, okay, this is just more uncertainty, and I don't like uncertainty. And my thesis project was about my grandmother and I translating her poetry from Spanish to English and then performing it together. Now, that wasn't the first idea, right? I wanted just to do a project about my grandmother, right? And who she is and her poetry and everything, right? And then when I come in with my footage to my academic advisor, she's like, "No, you have to be in it." And that's the worst thing I wanted to hear. It's I want to be the Asian dude from the Neptunes in the background, Like I don't want to be on camera. I hate being on camera. I hate what my face looks like. I hate the sound of my voice. I don't want to look, I want to be back there, afuera, And so it was tough, but and the poetry, like the performance poetry thing kind of sort of, happened in the sense that like I needed to put a bow on it, right? So I couldn't just do a documentary about my grandmother and her poetry, right? Because if I have to be on camera, then I need to have a definitive moment where all of this coalesces and has a thing that we do, right? And then through that process, it's like I learned so much about my grandmother. A lot of things came up about, like the shit that I internalized and as growing up as a a blanquito in the South Bronx, right? That doesn't speak Spanish. A lot of that came up, and like I was getting really, really, really upset about it, and I just wanted to finish it and what have you. And then there was a moment where that I came to terms with, like, you know what? Grandma is my grandma, right? Grandma is Puerto Rico, right? My family is Puerto Rico. Yeah, I'm a kid from the Bronx, right? I don't represent well as a Puerto Rican, so to speak, in terms of the culture. But like, you can't take my grandmother away from me. You can't take my mom, you can't take my sister, and you know, you can't take my family away from me. But the thing is along that process, I started to like really like notice things about my family and my grandmother that like she can't keep her hands still. She can't, right? She's cooking. She's either cooking or writing. If she's not writing, she's sewing maps. She sewed that map right here. Okay. She's she's got a hyperactive mind. And one of the things that I oh snap, that like I used to write poetry back in college and back in high school, and she loves poetry and she writes poetry all the time. And we do this show together where I recite her poems in English and she recites them in Spanish. And then there was one time where I recite a poem of hers in Spanish and she recites a poem of mine in English, right? And it's, the thesis statement is who you are cannot be separated from who you are from, right? And when it was premiered at, like our City Visions, I was going to wear the CCNY shirt, but like, it's a little small. But, I had there was a cross section of people in the program, which was like, I get like a quarter of them, maybe like a half, maybe a quarter, were Asian, from Asian descent, right? Like Taiwan, China, Thailand, all over the place. And the thing was, it was when my documentary came up, they, like, the Asian people in theater really got emotional. And afterwards, some of my classmates, they come up to me and they're like, man, that was so amazing. And there's so many people that, like, from our crew, they loved it. And it's like, even though they don't nothing, they don't speak Spanish, right? But like the passion, that the way that my grandmother recited her poems, and then, their love for the elders. And it's like, oh, snap, wait a minute. I think I might be onto something. That, like, you may assume that the thing that you're working on is for a particular audience, but then there's an audience out there that you don't know that could that the work that you do resonates. And that's why, like something like Thrilla, and that's kind of sort of like the approach. That's the approach that I go into every time I try to do something. That, like, there's somebody out there but you got to be clear, coherent. Make sure it's something that you can follow and be able to, like, don't get into the weeds of trying to outsmart your audience or anything like that. Everybody has feelings. Everybody has emotions. It's one of the things that my grandmother would say before she recites her poems. Is like, even though you don't understand Spanish, just stick with the emotion, right? And we'll meet each other at the end. Right. So, and that's sort of like that hit me very hard, to the point where it's like, oh, all right. So it may not just be about jujitsu, right? It's about the relationships or the things in your life that move you to a place that you become passionate about. Right. Or, anything that you're kind of sort of like seeking out for. You can't be everything to everybody. Right. It's, have focus on the thing that the story dictates. Like, there's no reason for me to, like, bolster up Adam or Mike in a way that they're kind of like superheroes, right? It's just, you just feel their passion, feel the dedication, get into the realm where your mind may not be in the sense of 45 pounds in 7 weeks. That's insane. Well, somebody did it. Right. So it's not impossible, but at the same time, don't find yourself in a situation where you have to fucking do that. Right. So it's so where I am now, 11 years later, it's something that's like, it's really funny because, like, I start to see and seek clarity on things. Right. Where kind of like block out the noise, try to get to the thing that, like, this might be important. Right. And then allow it to exist as the way that it is, as opposed to try to convince you that that's important. I hope that
Okay.
made sense. I know that's
No,
just like
it did. I feel like what you look through a lens, a lot of people don't get it. The person who's looking behind the lens it's almost like paying so much attention that you could watch the actual thread go right through the hole in the needle. Like, I've seen this, like, very distinct look that, especially when you see a photographer or a cinematographer, I've seen them look into that lens and, like, I don't know what they're seeing, but it looks like they're seeing infinity just kind of going on. And I think that's dope. So I get what you're saying, because that's an artistic view of things. That's, your own artistic license is based on you and what you see in the world and how you can show other people this particular vision, but it may not go that way. To them, they might see it a little differently. And even then, still pick up something beautiful from it. So I do like what you're sharing. That's beautiful, man. That's dope as fuck too.
And
I'm also
and I never want to, like, try to convince somebody that they're seeing something.
right.
Your audience will be there, and it will be what they are. And again, I feel like I'm just starting, because I'm just starting on my own stuff. The last 10 years, working on, freelancing and doing all types of work, where it's, you go through this process that's like, I'm doing my own work. Well, I'm doing somebody else's work, right? And they swear this is the best thing, right? They have so much hope for it, right? And nobody sees it. Right. I used to work on, like, I worked on The Get Down in locations. The Get Down is on Netflix. I mean, it was my only big budget work that I did. And again, I was like, my whole job was to pick up trash. right? And when I did, I was able to sit on set and watch, the production do its thing, and also like Baz Luhrmann, who did Romeo and Juliet with Claire Danes and Leonardo DiCaprio. Him. He's a very like the one thing that I learned from him watching what he was doing, even though he made life a living hell for a lot of people on that set, was like he's not afraid of his creativity. He's not afraid to take a chance, right? And it's easy to take chances when you've got a couple $100 million in your pocket, but that's no different from having no money in your pocket, right? You have a camera, go out, shoot something, right? And then try to figure out what it is that you're trying to do with it. A lot of things in the storytelling aspect is like, what is this thing supposed to be at the end? Well, you can't control that. It's something that, if you start working little by little, we're in the age now where you have to cultivate your own audience and you're proof positive, right? Like you're able to, bring people on that may have kind of like a following or something. And if they do have a following, then you got to put your best foot forward on, right? You got to be able to show them that, hey, you know what? Like, I like this guy. I'm gonna tune in, every time that he brings somebody on, because he's serious about his work and he's focused. Everybody thinks that like, you start a podcast, everybody wants to be Joe Rogan. No, I mean, like, first of all, Joe Rogan had to develop relationships for 20 some odd years to get to a point where people want to come in and talk to him for 3 hours. Right. But that's not the case. You have your own thing and you're going to do what it is that you feel like you can do in the work that you're doing. And that's it. Right. Don't think about the fucking White House. Right. Think about City Hall or think about your neighbors or whatever the fuck, and that's the thing. I mean, it's the scary part because you got to take the chance. But a lot of people get caught up in what it's supposed to look like, as opposed to just, all right, let me figure it out and let's see what I have, and then get better at the things that I'm not.
Yeah, I've noticed that too, not just with this podcast. Originally, I had a very different vision of what this was going to be, and then the other podcasts that I've been writing and helping produce and direct. So I get what you're saying. Kind of like you have to take it a step at a time, and then you got to work with what's in your constraints. And then I think with documentaries, especially like you stated, there's no way for you to be like, well, this is the beginning of the story, this is the end of the story, and we'll see how it goes in the middle. You just kind of have to go step by step by step by step and see what it is that's going to look like at the end, which I think that presents such a huge issue, especially if you're like a control freak like myself.
Yeah,
Huge control
yeah.
freak. I want to have everything in a certain place, and then to, like you said, not have that narrative escape where you can create the dichotomy and the direction in a specific way.
And that's the thing too. It's like you also have to remember that you can't tell the entire story. It's more of like, hey, if you're doing a historical documentary, right? Let's take a historical person, right? And you want to go through, where they came from up to when they passed away. You're going to have to gloss over a lot of things in order for it to be consumable. Right? 90 minutes, 2 hours, depending upon the person. And you got to be okay with that. It's it's okay to not tell the entire story, especially like, okay, for example, in Thrilla, I think one of the things that I thought about doing was, getting footage of Marcelo Garcia, because, and then getting into the weeds of what jujitsu is, kind of sort of getting like a historical backstory on jujitsu for everybody that isn't attuned, like doesn't know what jujitsu is about. But it's like now you're talking about like a 2 hour, 3 hour film, right? And so the thing too is that like I'm not the expert on it. And if anything, if Thrilla does its job, then people will seek out Legends and Mike and Adam so they can get a better understanding about who they are and what they've done, right? Because this little piece is just a small piece of a bigger story, right? And it just like sews into the fabric of the history of jujitsu, however big or small that is, right? Because they are the ambassadors, right? They are the ones that have the knowledge. They are the ones that have competed got injured, bled and sweat, and being just allowing yourself to take a little piece of this little pie, tell a really coherent, nice story, and then allowing the audience to go find the rest of the information that they are looking for. And it's like, and I feel like that's where like I got a peace of mind from that. They were like, I'm not a historian, right? I'm a storyteller at the end of the day, right? And if I do my job, then you should be moving on to the things that you want to know about.
Yeah, I feel you. I felt like watching the entire piece, because I know Mike and Adam, if I didn't know them, I would seek them out. I would have looked up into their history. I would have looked at what the hell was Adam doing in Hawaii for 10 years?
Yeah, no shit.
What, Mike's story, like, oh, he got a black belt from Marcelo Garcia, one of the best jiu-jitsu players in the world. But like, what else is there to this? Because there seems like there's more. Oh, he's the 30th black belt from Marcelo Garcia, and he had the history that he had with a specific team that shall not be mentioned. I'm not giving them any press, but I'm gonna be real about that one. Like, I think that the next thing I want to ask you has a lot of significance. What's your reaction when Thrilla won an award of recognition at Indie Fest? Like, does that validate the work, or do you just feel like, oh wow, we did that thing and we didn't expect it to go there?
And also, Asheville got an award for Impact Docs, which I found out last week. Listen, Thriller was actually gonna serve as, to get back to Digital Bodega, kind of sort of like a proof of concept of like what we can do, and being recognized. It wasn't obvious. Like, you can't anticipate that. It's super dope. I think my friends were a lot more excited than I was, because they're more like, I'm doing the work, right? And they see the work, and it's like, man, keep doing what you're doing. And then, just that having that backing help, like, is really awesome, because you spend a lot of time on your own doing this work, and you second guess all the time. So, and being premiered at the International Puerto Rican Heritage Film Festival, right? Going downtown, going to see it at a Regal Cinema, and it's just like, this looks weird. This looks so weird on a big screen. But then it's like, I can't shut my editing brain off. It's like, well, I gotta fix this, I gotta fix that, I gotta fix this. But the film festival process can be political in a sense. There are like these kind of like unwritten rules, and so like, you want to get your documentary or your film into Rochester Film Festival, but it's the International Rochester Film Festival. So you put it into, Joe's Barbecue International Film Festival. It's like, oh, well, that's an international premiere. So you're eliminated from any sort of film festival that is an international film festival, right? So like, being able to submit something to blindly submit, and then, hey, look, we like your thing. Here's an award of recognition. Okay, that's fucking dope, right? But like, proof of concept is just to see what we're doing, like at Digital Bodega, right? See what we're doing. When you have to deal in a space where like politics gets involved, it's not fun for a creator and anything, but where we are in the sense of distribution, that like, okay, people are recognizing our work. So just to go back to this whole thing that like, building your audience, then we're on to something. That's it. That's all we know for now. We're on to something. So let's just keep at it. And, being able to be put in a position to allow an audience to make up their own mind about what you do. That's all we want, as opposed to, a third hand, telling people this is amazing and you have to see it and all this other kind of stuff. It's no, again, we're from the Bronx, right? We got to fight for everything that we have, and we don't take anything for granted. And it's a nice gesture, and it's cool, we put it on the resume. And the thing is too, is that, Impact Docs and Indie Fest, you got to pay for your award. Fine, I'll do it, and I'll put in Legends, because they did all the work, honestly. And I will say that, like, when I knew that we had something is that when I was asking Mike about, what does he get out of jujitsu? It was something that everybody had to hear because you can replace jujitsu with metallurgy. You can replace jujitsu with anything. That's like, you find your passion, right? And then you've got to work your way through the hardships of that passion. And then Adam, where it's like, it's a way of life, it's essential. And that's when I knew that you didn't have to go back to kind of explain what jujitsu is, right? Because they're giving you the feel of it. And that's what I needed. And it's like, well, yeah, well, you know what? They deserve. And then again, when you almost die cutting 45 pounds, I'm pretty sure you deserve an award.
So so Mike cutting weight was what got the award initially.
Yeah, I'll get the award, and I'll put it right on the shelf in Legends.
We appreciate that. There is something I did want to talk about, and I know that with Indie Fest and with the Impact Awards, those are huge, but I feel like, especially speaking about the history of your family, your grandmother, that closeness, that bond, it kind of gets the I don't know if you know the famous Puerto Rican poet Juan Antonio Corretjer. I can never say his name. So hard to say his name, but that famous poem Boricua en la Luna. Yo
Oh,
sería
wait a minute.
Boricua,
Hold
pero
on.
nací en la
Give
Luna.
me. Yeah, wait. Keep recording. Hold on a second.
I got you.
Give me a second. You might have to cut for a second. I need to find I need to find this.
I got you.
Oh.
It's all good. It's all good.
So I got this one. Right? No, that's not working. Right? Wait. Hold on. 1 second. Oh my goodness. I have the shirt in here somewhere.
It's all good. I'm sure it is there.
All right. Once we're done, I will find the shirt and I will text you the shirt, and then you kind of like post it in the interview. But damn, I got all these black shirts, and it's a black shirt, so like, Jesus,
it's all right.
Damn it.
I feel you. But back to the question, we do talk about your Puerto Rican heritage, which right now, Puerto Rico's on fire because Bad Bunny gave y'all so much love and definitely represented in the best way. But the feeling that you kind of get is that feeling of Boricua en la Luna by Juan Antonio Corretjer, whose last name I will never repeat again. But
Corretjer.
It's hard to say because it's Corret, and then I'm like,
and he's like, your brain kind of like.
Yeah.
Your brain usually puts the R's in front of the T's.
And then on top of that, to make it worse, I'm, Dominican. I rolled the R's. So my brain is like, I'm rolling R's. I promise I'm rolling R's. But you get the 2024 official selection at the International Puerto Rican Heritage Film Festival. I'm sure for you and Mike, that has to be one of those things where, like, you kind of, there's an extra pep in your step, your chest kind of comes up a little bit. Is there something more significant about seeing your people give love to your film?
Absolutely, because the goal for the International Puerto Rican Heritage Film Festival is, the importance to share our stories as Puerto Ricans. That's why it's the Heritage Film Festival, as opposed to the International Puerto Rican Film Festival, where the focus is on issues on the island, but it was the Puerto Rican Heritage Film Festival was started by a woman, Veronica Caicedo. If you see this, Veronica, I'm sorry. Like, she's from Brooklyn, if I'm not mistaken. You grow up as Puerto Rican in New York, right? New Yorican kind of thing. So we have different experiences in our lives, not growing up on the island. And, that's why it's like, you either, wherever if you're Puerto Rican, if your parents are from Puerto Rico and you're born in New York, you're either you're from the borough that you're from, right? Like, you're from the Bronx, you're from Brooklyn, from Manhattan, from Harlem. And because, you're not from the island, but the culture is with you. The experiences, how you're brought up is Puerto Rican, and you live your life that way. And it's a very interesting sort of story in the sense that, it's not a Puerto Rican story per se, Thrilla, but where Mike and I come from, our families that, they're very fucking Puerto Rican. very, very, very Puerto Rican, and that sort of, that discipline, that familiar relationship that you have, it is Puerto Rican, right? It just happens to be in the Bronx. So the idea around the film festival actually was just that you go to these film festivals around the city or whatever, and it's just like, it's all white people, it's all other people. It's like we're not being represented. And, you have to fight to get representation, but then, representation gets taken too far, where it's like something like a Thriller can't be seen in, a Manhattan Film Festival, whatever, because it's too masculine or it's too whatever. But like being acknowledged in your own community, again, goes back to the point of, well, it's just reciprocation from what we were taught or how we grew up, and the way that, Mike's discipline to jujitsu is just not, it's not just about him making a choice, right? Like, he's always thinking about his father, right? Like he's always, and his mom, and, the same way for me that, you are who you are from, and those people are Puerto Rican, and we continue to abide by that, right? Like you just don't go to California or West Virginia or Michigan and become a new person. No, you go to these places as the person you were built by the people that you were around. And I'm never gonna go out in the world and say that I'm like so Puerto Rican or whatever. Look, man, I'm just a storyteller. And, there's so much greatness in our culture that needs to be celebrated and should be celebrated. A thing like Thriller is just, again, a little piece of the fabric, because again, you could be, and what's actually interesting. So when you brought up the quote, when I was in Mercyhurst is in, again, shout out to Mercyhurst. Mercyhurst is in Erie, Pennsylvania, right? Western Pennsylvania. So they have like a poetry month, and they bring in poets from, very affluent poets at the time. This is 2005. This is 2005 to, there's a poet, Puerto Rican poet, Martin Espada. He came, and I have one of his books in my library. And I had a book, poetry book, and he wrote that quote, and I'll show it to you. Hold on a second. I just killed the book. Damn it.
Oh,
Never mind the fact that like I've had this for 20 years, and my academic advisor at the time gave it to me. Hey man, 20 years.
it made it a
There
very
he
long
goes.
night.
Here it is. Here it is. See that?
Yeah, I'm seeing it right on screen. That's beautiful.
20 years ago, you'd be Puerto Rican if you were born on the moon. And someone like me that like, yeah, man, I got scared out of speaking Spanish because I used to get made fun of when I was a kid. Even to this day, man, it's hard for me to speak Spanish, but I cannot be who I am without the people that I'm from. And I think that like the respect that I have for those people is something that's always going to be reflected in my work. Especially like a guy like Mike, who has always been there for me, thick and thin. Being able to like, hey, look, you don't have to be a flag carrying, but I know who the he bottles are, with the great stories, but I have a camera and some recording equipment and we can do something, and sharing our stories and being able to do stuff like that, man, I feel like that's the way that I can contribute. I don't need to be the front man for anything. It's just, there's so many beautiful things about our community and culture that people don't have the access to kind of get themselves out there. And so I guess that's where I come in, kind of stuff. Again, Izzy is like, for you, Izzy is a Dominican and loves his people, and again, he understands too that like, he's representing his people too. And I wish he could have been on here, but he's always working. He's always working, man. Right now he's the hardest working dude in independent business.
Well, we got to give these flowers for sure, and representing the island, of course. And I get that. As a Dominican kid born in New York, you don't know I'm Dominican until I speak English. I mean, well, until I speak Spanish. But once you hear me speak English, you're like, oh, he's American. He was born here. Because my mom just said that the other day. She was like, you know something? My friends, half of them hear you speak Spanish, and they're like, how long did you leave him on the island? And my mom was like, he's never lived on the island. He grew up here in New York, in Yonkers. He's from New York. He's like a true New Yorker. My son will get mad and wear a pair of Timbs just to let you know it's a threat. Like, so yeah, you see me in a Yankee fitted in Timbs, you know what time it is. Like, back up.
You know what? You want to hear some real quick, real funny.
Yeah.
So like I mentioned, I used to play college football in Erie, Pennsylvania, at Mercier. So one of my boys, Jared Adams, he was my teammate, and when he graduated 2004. He went to Puerto Rico. Right, he was going to be there for like 6 months. Hasn't left. And so he's actually, like, last time I spoke to him, he was the vice president of football operations on the island, right? Like, and so, like, we ran into him. Yo, he sounds Puerto Rican. White boy from Ohio. He's Puerto Rican. He spent more time in Puerto Rico than he spent time in Ohio. He's Puerto Rican.
Lord. Okay, yeah, he's Boricua official. There's a meme video, and it's like when the white boy's cultured, and it's the Dominican kid, and he's got all the chains on, and he's got the Dominican jersey on. It's a white, like, puro blanco, and he's like, "¿Qué lo que manito? ¿Qué lo que? Estamos ahí, ta. Tú sabes." La cultura, and he started playing baseball like a Dominican. He hit the ball. He did the Chami Sosa to his mom, ran off with a Dominican flag. Hey! Starts playing guira. I was dying. I was like, yo, that is what happens, though. You get sucked into our culture, then you stuck. Because we actually have one friend, been friends with my brother since his high school days. He's a Spanish teacher. He's a white boy, puro blanco. When he comes to our family function, his wife looks at him differently because, he doesn't talk like he does at work, where it's el español profesional y castellano and all that bullshit that he does at work. He comes and he's like, he gives me a big hug and everything. She's like, what the fuck just happened? She's like, we're giving him a hug and everything. He's part of the family. So she's like, I've never seen him get this active with anybody. I was like, yeah, because he's been around us so long. When he goes to the house, he speaks Spanish. He eats the same way. He talks to everybody. Siontillo, Siontilla, has the whole vibe. So, they pass the vibe check. You become a part of the culture. And that's beautiful. But that speaks volumes to our culture. We really just be sucking people in. They should be stuck. They're like, yeah, one of y'all now. Like, I bet. That's what's up. And we quickly to be like, okay, honorary Dominican, honorary Puerto Rican. All right, high five, my G. What's good?
It's like, like, what? You have the barbecue, right? Like, oh, you're invited to the barbecue. It's like, no, you're invited to the pig roast.
Right. You're invited to temporada, you're invited to la parada, you're invited to parandas, and then for the Dominicans, you'll be like, you get a cédula.
Wait. You're invited to the Sweet 16.
Yeah. ¿Tú vas para casa, mija? Claro que sí.
That's when you're fucked. It's like, yo, what do you... That's when you're fucked.
So you're super fucked. You won't be sleeping for like 2 days, but, God bless you. My family parties don't end until 5 a.m. I'll be like, God damn, we're holding people hostage at this point. Go home.
No shit.
Like, no, I don't want to be rude and leave early. Bro,
you're like 6 a.m. playing dominoes and shit.
Drunk, talking about politics for some reason. I'm like, God. Why? And then listening to Julio Iglesias. What the fuck happened? Who hurt these dudes, bro? I'm like, yo, y'all are married with kids. Why you so hurt? What's happening right now? And my dad does that shit all the time. His favorite shit is that or fucking El Triste by Jose Jose. I'm like, yo, bro, you're married. You have children. You're still married to your wife.
No, wait,
later. What are you doing?
Puerto Rico, at some point, like at 3 or 4 in the morning, playing dominoes. You play Preciosa by Mark Anthony. Oh, and then it's just like, and everybody stops. And then everybody gets up, and and then when the song's over, we're back to domino. It's like, oh no, fuck that! You looked at my dominoes, man. What the fuck is wrong with you? Like, yeah,
we go to war for the 5 seconds over a song. You say that like this. My family, I don't know what it is, but like I grew up listening to bolero with my grandparents, so I listened to, like, if you watch me with older folks listening to music, they're like, how the hell you know this song? I'm like, yo, I was raised with my grandparents.
Oh, yeah.
Those old boleros from the 50s and 60s,
Yeah.
Sabor a mí. I'm listening to like Thrilla Los Panchos and shit, and there's these grown ass folks looking at me like, young man, how do you know this song? And I'm like, yo, listen, I didn't have a choice.
Like how I learned how to dance salsa was there was a couple of senior community buildings that were constructed in the South Bronx that, it was senior living, right? And then, like, during holidays, like, there was a big kitchen and grandma would be down there like cooking, and everybody and she had all her friends cooking. Like, after everybody ate, they cleared out the tables, and then all the old folks would come down dancing, right? And then like the old men, they come down dressed to the nines and shit, right? And then like, like they're stiff, right? Because they're, like in the 80s. And like, and this is like 70-year-olds, 80-year-olds, right? It's not like now where like everybody's like so like energetic and shit. And, like, so they'd be like, right, real stiff, right? But they were like mad smooth with the feet, So then, anytime that was like in the 90s, right, it was like becoming a teenager or like being a teenager. So like that's how I learned, like watching them. And I was like, why are you so stiff? But then the thing is like you do the thing with the feet and then like you twist and then all this. It's like, oh shit, what the fuck was that? It's like, yo, these old men taught me. That's how I learned that's how I dance salsa.
Yeah, they have a different style when you get to like, it almost looks like professional dancing. You're like, yo, what he just did? How he twerk? Why he turn her like that?
Before the whole that, like before all that shit, like it's like they're like,
yeah, they grab a girl and start steering. That's what I used to be like. It's like a steering wheel for them.
Yo, never move. That was the whole thing. Never move your shoulders. You move your shoulders. It's like yo, never move your shoulders, right? And never bite your under like your lower lip. It's like those were the rules. Don't move your shoulders. Don't bite your lower lip.
Nah, I'm a for that girl. I always do it.
Now, hey, fuck it.
Now she gonna know what time it is. You bite that lip. Nah, my wife is in the other room looking at me like, "What the fuck did you just say? I thought you talking about the films and shit. What is my husband doing?" I'm sure of it, but it's alright.
Oh shit. Oh man.
So what's next for you? Do you already have another project lined up? Do we have like an expected time of release or anything as of right now?
So right now, like I'm working on my grandmother's documentary. She was the first Puerto Rican-born woman to be elected to any state assembly in the country. And it's not just because like she's my grandmother, but like she's a very interesting person, and also that how she was very integral in the expansion of bilingual education in the state of New York, which also became a model for other foreign language speakers, like when you talk about people from India and China, that like the model that was created under her initiatives became the model for other languages. And also she's a very interesting person. Again, like she's an artist. So that's what we're working on right now in terms of, okay, so like I'm kind of sort of in this nebulous situation where I don't have distribution yet. Eddie Bravo still hasn't seen it, which, Eddie Bravo, if you're listening, it'd be great for you to check this out. It's actually anybody that's living in the Bronx. It's going to be on BronxNet April 7th at 10 p.m. But what I can do now is like I can actually just the link that I sent you. Anybody that's interested, hit up Danny. He'll send you the link. That's how we can do it. Or, I feel like that's the way that we should do it now, because the whole idea is to be able to like find some distribution, and the current cut right now won't be the final cut. So, just seeing if anybody in the audience willing to participate into checking out what it is now. But yeah, so far that's what I have, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
How about with that? We're definitely gonna look up for Grandma's new documentary. I do think the fact that Grandma's on that Jacobo Morales vibe is really like a testament to how where you come from. Like you said, she sews those not just the flag, but she creates the entire country and she sews it. She's done so much. She was the first one in the assemblies in all of the states. As not just a Latino, but like as a Boricua, you have to have a special level of like pride right now in that. And then as her grandson, I don't know if you've ever had that moment where you look at her, you're like, yo, you're dope. What is going on here?
It's it's more of like, what is your capacity? What's your capability as a person? There was a long time in my life where I really didn't have that connection with like grandma's grandma, right? And I always knew that grandma was important. And even my mom too. My mom was in the city council for 10 years, and coming from like an athletic background, there is a sort of like, how do you compare? It was like the way that you think is like, how do you compare to like somebody like that? And what ultimately ended up happening is that my mom ran for re-election in 2013. So I got to know my mother better, the way that she works, as opposed to just her being mom. And then through that, learning how grandma works, right? And the thing is, it was just more of like, at the end of the day, this is what you're capable of. And I'm not saying that like, oh, I'm gonna run for office or anything, but like how they approach issues, right? How they approach their work. It's just like most of it sucks, right? But you got to do it, right? And you got to pay attention to it. So you just got to be present, be able to just show up and don't put any expectation on what's going to happen in front of you, right? Just attack the thing that you need to attack at the moment. Keep moving forward. Keep at it. And that's where, like, they did it because they felt like they had to do it. The documentary work that I'm doing is kind of sort of, well, I find myself working with them, they're always seeking clarity about things, right? They're always trying to, all right, where did the fuck up happen? Kind of thing. They're the thing. And, let's not belabor the point. Okay, whoever needs to get reamed at gets reamed at, and that's it. Let's just keep moving forward, right? That's what I've learned from them, right? And being able to just like take that into my work only helps because again, I'm like I'm trying to see clarity, and then being able to like allow people that know more than me to get their moment to express themselves. And it's my job to get them to trust me and know that like I'm trying to put them in a position to be heard. Because one thing that I've figured out very early in documentary filmmaking is that this story is not about me. And being able to take a subject, somebody that can give something to a people that what is it? Why is it you do what you do? Especially in a situation where like they're successful, right? Because what happens is that especially when they're not like so accessible, you've got speculation, right? This is how they act. Oh, I remember this person 20 years ago, right? Like people are like, oh, I remember that person. Oh, I was like, we drank. Wait, like he was an asshole 20 years ago. Like, well, if that's what you're going to hang on, well, you're not really representing the person the way that they should be, right? Because everybody gets their day in the sun. Everybody has an opportunity to be seen, right? But don't force it, and that's kind of sort of that's how I've seen how I approach my filmmaking, because it's more of a job to just like, there's so much misunderstanding, and especially in a political sense, especially in my family, that it's like, all right, look, I'm not trying to convince people that what you think about them is wrong or right, but I'm going to give them the floor for them to explain themselves, and then you make your decision after that, right? And like, in a Thriller, it's like, hey, look, this is the way that it fucking went, okay? And the outcome is the outcome. But the other thing too is like the story doesn't end. And that's the beautiful part about Thriller and the name Legends, that like it's the legend continues, like the story continues. And they, Adam and Mike are the ones that will dictate that story, right? Not me. It's just, you just have to see this to figure out who these people are, And by the way, Sleepy Hollow International Film Festival, if you listen to this, let me know when you open up your books. Because if we don't get Thriller into Sleepy Hollow Film Festival, we will riot. Just saying. Just saying. It makes sense. Come on.
Open a few doors. I'm actually in Sleepy Hollow currently working. I'm working helping the community, doing some type of community outreach. I'm also the account manager for the area.
I also did fuck up last year that like I totally forgot, like missed
their deadline,
their application, their submission process.
Yeah, they're pretty awesome. They're very awesome, neighborhood, and they're very supportive. Definitely something we could definitely get into at some point as well. But all right, Ricardo. So we've got Thrilla. We know we have a next project already starting. Where can the people reach you? What can they expect next from you? We'll also put links in the description. So if we want to put Izzy or Digital Bodega in there, we'll do that as well. But what do you have to say to the folks at home who have been supporting everything so far and who are interested in watching Thrilla and your next pieces of work?
Listen, I'm always thankful for anybody that takes the time out to see the work that I'm doing, see the work that Digital Bodega is doing. We're at the infant stage right now. Stay locked in, stay focused about. I don't say stay focused. That's so stupid. I'll give you all the information about, and then like I'll give you my YouTube stuff, because there's some bizarre stuff that I got on there from when I was still in film school. All I gotta say is just I appreciate anybody that takes the time to check out my work, our work, check out Thrilla and support legends, because they're a different kind of school. Because it's not you're not just learning martial arts there. You're learning community. And in terms of Digital Bodega, we got a lot of stuff coming up. Stay posted, and obviously we'll send Danny everything that you guys need. And in terms of how to find Thrilla, so what I'll do now is just I'll make Thrilla the version that I sent you and post it up, and anybody that wants to see it. Once you're not be able to see it, that's a good problem, which means that we probably found some distribution works. Gotta thank you, Danny, for this opportunity. I really thought this was going to be like an hour, and we went 2. This is and again, good luck to you, because what you're doing is really, really dope. Pretty sure that you're going to be in a good place really, really soon, doing what you're doing, because again, the amount of faith, the amount of trust that you're cultivating. And yeah, man, checked out some of your episodes. Just keep at it. Whenever you have an opportunity to, put a I don't want to say put a bit of like put a request out for funding, I'm pretty sure you'll find it.
I appreciate that, man. We're actually looking for sponsors into the season. We'll find them. I ain't stressing about it. I know it'll come when it's meant to come. The good Lord, you ask and you shall receive. So we'll see when that happens. But as for you, Rick, man, your work is phenomenal. The version of Thriller that I saw, that edited version that you sent me, is something out of this world. Definitely going to share it in the description. So everybody go into the description in the video. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Of course, go into the description. Make sure you get your link to watch Thrilla on YouTube. It's for free at this time. Take advantage while it's up. And of course, you've got to go check out Digital Bodega. Our boy Ricardo is going to be, I'm going to put his Instagram inside the description as well, so you can go ahead and follow him, see what else is coming up. Might put some reels out, let you know what the next project is, give you a little teaser, some trailers, whatever he decides to do. But you're going to definitely want to keep up with the guy. Also, he's fucking hilarious on socials. Don't let that shit fool you. He's fucking hysterical. He's had me dying for weeks on end, and I'm like, this guy is nuts. I love it.
I am the master of IG stories.
Yes, I spend like a good 10 minutes a day on those IG stories, dying, laughing. I'm like, yo, my man. But at least we have a good time. So make sure to check the description for everybody. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I hope, that today you keep your health, keep your peace. Those are the most important ones, in my opinion. Thank you again for your curiosity. Ricardo Aguirre is in the goddamn room with us. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. We can't wait to see you in the next one. Peace.